Hello, everybody. Welcome to Teaching Writing in College. And our tagline here is where the driving question is, how can instructors in higher education leverage theory, science, pedagogy, and craft most effectively to help their learners with writing? This is episode 39. My working title right now is the Back to Class Reflection Series. Don't reward product, reward students' knowledge about writing instead. And so I'll kind of think through that title. I'm not quite sure if that's the title I want, but you'll see it, of course, when the episode gets posted. But anyway, just for a quick review here, just in the last couple of episodes, I talked a little bit about the frustration that we saw in the Chronicle of Higher Education from that English professor about how assignments simply aren't gradable anymore, where presumably students are, not doing a lot, during a unit and then just turning in a piece of work that seems like it's written by AI. It's hard to make that distinction. And so it gets really frustrating. And, excuse me, to go along with that, one thing that I think about quite a bit is that part of the problem, or something that leads to that problem, especially here in the age of AI, is that our education system is built around extrinsic motivation. It's built around grades. And I've noticed, throughout my career that students, of course, expect grades, and that's the way our system is built, and so of course they should do that. And the idea is that in order to get a grade, you do something, and so they will do the things that lead to the grade, and that can lead to, probably the temptation to take shortcuts. And I think a lot of that has to do with the focus of that extrinsic motivation, the focus of grades. And I've said this on the podcast before, that oftentimes we put a lot of points into just one bucket, into that large exam, into that midterm, into that final paper, or into the large major papers. If you have 3 papers in a semester and those papers themselves get most of the points, the idea in a writing course is that, well, you need to, since it's a writing course, you need to put the grades where the writing is. And that's something that I've thought about, going on early in my career. I remember thinking about that, maybe the grading should be about 70% for the bigger papers, and then, 30% can be divided among things like peer reviews and drafts and participation and so on. But that also has its own set of problems. And, one thing that I've been thinking about lately, just in preparation for this episode, is, for a long time, and I got this early on in graduate school, that we need to be talking about the writing process instead of the product. But then it is easy to go and put the points on the product instead of the process. And this episode, of course, is not about the writing process. It's going to go in a different direction. But the idea there is that, we need to shift it away from the product. We need to shift it away from that final thing that gets turned in, because there's a lot of points involved there. It's easy to want to take shortcuts for that. AI can do a pretty good job of mimicking those products. And so that's something that we want to avoid. And part of the solution then is just don't reward those finished products, but instead reward activities that lead to knowledge about writing. And here I go again on my PowerPoint slide. Not my PowerPoint slide, my LibreOffice slide. I have a little mistake there. I'm going to fix that. There we go. Okay. But anyway, we want to reward activities that lead to knowledge about writing instead of just the finished products. And so a couple of things in background here that I think can help with that, because it's really important to set up the course in a way that's going to reward the right thing, so that students are motivated to go after not necessarily the finished products, but the things that lead to the learning along the way. And so one of my favorite YouTube videos, I actually share this with my class. I think it's about, 6 minutes long or so, but it's called Deliberate Practice, Achieve Mastery in Anything. And I've got just a screenshot of it here. I've got the URL. It's on YouTube. And I'll also put this in the show notes in case you'd like to look at it. But I really love it. It's just a little cartoon kind of where the narrator talks about the research behind deliberate practice, talks about how practice works and how to do it well in order to, like it says, achieve mastery in anything. And what they do is the illustrations are kind of drawn as the narrator is speaking. And so I've got a slide here with a completed little scene from the video. And so it's all drawn out. But I like the little idea at the top, emulate practice, not performance. And then if you're listening, what it is it's got a performer. She's on stage in front of an audience. But then also you can see her just in the next little portion behind a curtain where she's practicing that performance. And then the last little part of that is she's sitting in a chair and she's tired. She's done a lot of work. But the idea behind that is, the performance isn't really where it counts. It's not really how she got there. How she got there was through the practice. And then at the bottom part of the slide talked about Luciano Pavarotti, famous opera singer, and then also Messi, the soccer player. And it's got both of them there. They're both, very well known, well renowned for what they do. But the idea in the video is, and then it's got a little brain studying each of them. And it's not studying them, when they are in front of a crowd or when they're in a soccer game. It's studying them when they are, for Pavarotti, when he's in the studio or wherever he practiced. That's where the brain is taking notes. It's taking notes on what he's doing during his practice sessions. And the same thing with soccer, with Messi in the soccer ball there. He's not in his uniform. He's not out on the field with other players. He's not in front of a crowd. He's just working with the ball. And that's what the little brain character is studying in the cartoon. And the little brain characters all throughout the cartoon. But the message there is study how they practice, don't study them during their performance. And I like to use this with my students a lot, just this idea that, English 105 in my case, or 106 or 107 or whatever I'm teaching, is the practice, and their other classes are the performance, or their social lives are their performance, and so on and so forth. And so I like to talk with them about that, and I even have them repeat it. English 105 is have them repeat practice, and my other classes are and then have them say performance or something like that. I do that. I try to do that once in a while through the semester, frequently, maybe weekly at least. That's something that they remember, because then the idea is we're going to focus on it gives us a chance to focus on knowledge about writing. It gives us a chance to focus on the internalization of that knowledge and just sort of building the skill so that they can use it later. Another book that I'm thinking about that has to do with this, I've probably mentioned this before, is Make It Stick by Peter C. Brown, Henry Rudiger III, and Mark McDaniel. And in this book, I remember one chapter, maybe it's a chapter or maybe it's a portion of a chapter, and I can't remember all of the details, but there is a professor at a university who is giving larger assignments with lots of points, like midterms and finals. And he wasn't happy with the results that he was getting, and so he tried an experiment by spacing all of that out. He took the material from the midterm and the final and spread it out periodically throughout the semester in the form of quizzes instead. And what he found was that he saw better results on those quizzes, and he also, the students were a little bit happier because they kind of knew what was going on and when just a little bit more. And the idea there was just that it was, gradual practice spread out over time. And, it took away the opportunity, I think, to kind of wait and then cram for the exam and do it as kind of a one-time performance. And so that's something that I think about in the book Make It Stick that I think applies here as well, where everything is kind of spread out. I had another slide here. What am I? Make sure that okay. There's one more before. I think I'm just going to switch these slides around. before I get back to my, there we go. In this slide, there's also Asao Inoue with labor-based grading. He's written a couple of books about that. He also has a blog about it, which, and I've got just a quote here that I think is really important. And I'm not talking about labor-based grading directly, but I think it's worth thinking about. And I think it's worth looking into and maybe trying it out in your class for the same reasons that I have been talking about. You know, just what it does is it takes the focus of the grade away from those finished products, which is really important. And his goal here is to create more equity in the classroom, also a really important goal. And his quote here, I think, sums it up better than I can in this short space. I do want to come back and talk about this sometime too, though, because it is really important, and kind of look at, you know, what I'm thinking about grading large assignments versus, you know, smaller incremental kinds of things, and Inoue's idea of labor-based grading. But here's his quote. One way to understand this focus on labor and effort, because that's where the grade comes from, is to consider what this course is really about. This is a writing course, not a paper course. Writing is a verb, a practice. It is a labor. A paper is at least one step removed from that labor and learning. It is a product of your labor, not your labor itself. So our grading system should align with what this course is mostly about, which is your acts of learning, your labors of writing. And in this blog post, and then also in his book, I think the blog post, if I remember right, is students are an audience for that. Really good. This one here, I've got the link up on the screen for you to read. And I will also put this and his book in the show notes. I think it's really worth looking at if you're setting up your class and you're trying to take the focus off of those end products, because that's really important. And so for this next slide, focusing attention on knowledge about writing. And so focusing that attention, if we want to reward big projects, this is, you know, historically what things have looked like for me for pretty much my entire career. You might have 3 or 4 projects. I've got 3 here: project 1, project 2, project 3. Those are all 25% each. And so just the big final projects for each thing that students do, that's 75% of their grade just in those 3 assignments. And then I go and I grade them and I return them and so on. Drafts might be 5% or so. Peer reviews might be 10% or so. Participation might be 10%. So that's where the remaining 25% would go. So that's, you know, just a rough one. You know, mine have looked something like this, you know, since I started teaching in 1999. And then in the next column, there's a grading scheme that would reward learning a lot more. And so participation might be 50%. Pre-reflection might be 10%. You know, and once again, you know, learning, you know, practicing things in the participation, reflecting on things, really important too. So those are going to get some credit just on their own, especially the participation and kind of, you know, spending time doing the things that will lead to learning. And then the projects, project 1, project 2, project 3, maybe those are 10% each. And then a post-reflection, another 10% or so. And so the projects themselves are only 30% of the grade in this case, and 70% of the grade is based on things that lead to learning. The reward is coming when students are doing things that lead to learning, and so that's really important. I think that's the biggest thing that this has in common with the labor-based grading right there. So the question becomes, well, if we're going to spend, you know, 50% of the points on just participation, what could be done? And so just some examples here of things that turn into class activities, like define terms from writing and rhetoric, you know, things that we're learning about writing. Develop practical examples of those terms in action. And so that would be, you know, whatever the skill is, maybe there's a little passage that students write. The teacher can supply passages too that provide examples of those actual writing skills, those actual rhetorical skills. There could be reflection on past, present, or future knowledge about writing. There could be reflection on transfer, which I like to do quite a bit. Take notes in Cornell form. That I've covered too, I think, in episode 30 of this podcast. Make decisions about the larger project, also really important. And so all of those kinds of things could be turned into participation credit. And as I'm, well, in a future episode, I'll probably talk a little bit more about reflecting on transfer, because there are some things that I want to add there too. And I'm also thinking quite a bit about Elizabeth Wardle and Doug Downs and their assertion that we can't teach writing itself, but we can, the knowledge, it's knowledge about writing that we're after in writing courses. And so that's kind of what's going on here. What knowledge about writing is taking place. Some of it comes from defining the terms, some of it comes from practicing them. And so those practical examples of those terms in action, if a student has that in their notes and they carry that on to another class, or they carry that, with them into other things that they do, if they reflect on how, here's how I might take that particular skill and change it up when I'm working on this thing in this other class that I'm doing, those all would be really good opportunities to develop knowledge about writing that could be rewarded with participation credit. And so I think it's important also, I've got this on the slide too, it's important to have a curriculum based in knowledge about writing, i.e. rhetoric. And so back to my style, or my example of style, before I get into, once again, I've said that I want to get into the stuff about inductive reasoning that I've done where I felt really successful. I've also felt successful with style, and I'm kind of using style as a briefer example, and then I'll get into all of the activities I did with the inductive reasoning, like I have said. And so that'll be coming up in some episodes here soon. But anyway, if I have an example, maybe we're talking about rhetorical style. It's one of the things that we're covering in the class. And so maybe one thing that students would produce is a one-paragraph passage of practice writing in a particular style, maybe a style they're not used to writing in. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just something where they're practicing changing the style behind, that's different from, maybe what they're used to doing in a 5-paragraph essay. A definition of style that comes from the student, from memory. Another one might be students write a brief passage of rhetorical analysis using the concept of style. So once again, all three of these things, they're all about style, but they're approaching style from different ways. So it's some varied practice, that helps them see the same concept from lots of different angles and use the concept in lots of different ways. Another one might be reflection on stylistic adjustment from one genre to another. And so, maybe just off the top of my head, going from a short dictionary entry, because dictionary entries oftentimes read a certain way, and then maybe in an encyclopedia it would sound a little bit different in an encyclopedia entry, and they wouldn't have to write the whole encyclopedia entry, but maybe just a brief definition from a dictionary, and then maybe a little bit of prose, a slightly longer passage that might look like something from an encyclopedia entry. Or, a couple of genres that students are working with. Style on the rubric for a larger project. I'm trying to remember what I was thinking when well, that might be, if there's the larger project and it comes time to issue a grade, and if you're using a rubric like students like, this wouldn't work with labor-based grading, I don't think. Once again, I want to explore that later. But if you've got this rubric and there's an element or an entry on style, a row for style on that rubric, then that would be another opportunity to engage with style. And that could be brought into the classroom as well. What does the rubric say and how do we adjust for this particular project? Another one, analysis of style in a spoken genre, maybe from a video clip using components of style like linguistic register or whatever. A few different ones would be good, written or spoken, I think. Breaking down the components of style would be another really good one. Analyze style in a passage written by AI. I thought about that one just because, I've been using AI to help me, like I've talked about with some projects at home. And, sometimes it gets really enthusiastic and says, absolutely. And, so it's kind of got a writing style, and maybe that varies and changes over time. But analyzing that style might be worthwhile. Definition of style from the instructor, paraphrased by the student. That kind of goes along with a definition of style that comes from the student from memory. So there you could also get into things like prior knowledge, current knowledge, and kind of tap into what the student has heard about style before versus maybe the way the instructor is talking about style from theories of rhetoric somewhere. So lots of possibilities there that could be on any given classroom day. You wouldn't want to do these all in one class period, but over time these could be participation when you're talking about style, and you give students an opportunity to engage with it and learn about it, and then the points come from that. So I think from a cognitive perspective, those things that that focus on activities that are going to foster learning are worth a lot more than the project where maybe in this case they adjusted for style well in just a one and done fashion. And this was true also even before Gen AI hit the scene. The way that we learn hasn't changed. The way that our brains are set up and equipped to learn hasn't changed. And so having that varied practice, that's something that has been in the literature for a long time. And in a way, that's just getting us back to a place where the learning is what's most important. So here are the resources. I'm just about done with this episode. Here are the resources. There's Make It Stick by Brown, Roediger, and McDaniel, 2014. Easy to find on a search. I'm sure that copies of that can be found just about anywhere where you like to shop for books. Teaching Writing in College, episode 30 about the Cornell notes, if you wanted to go back to that and take a look. Just for participation credit, that's how I set my class up every class period. So, and then within that, we might work on style or the inductive reasoning I'm going to talk about and everything else. And so that's where the practice would be. That's where the labor would be, is in those notes. The video, Deliberate Practice, Achieve Mastery in Anything. There's the URL again on YouTube. And Asao Inoue. Here's his latest book. He's got, the book is called Cripping Labor-Based Grading for More Equity in Literacy Courses. And he outlines it there. And I think he has another book. I think this one's from 2023. And then he, I think, has an earlier book that also would be available, also worth taking a look at. The one that I did before, his Blogspot, I'll put that also in the show notes that go with this episode that I covered a little bit earlier. I guess I could go up and put it in right now. Let me see. Just so that it's convenient and everything's in one spot. Let's see. So labor-based grading. Just going to put that in here too. I'm having a little bit of formatting trouble, but I'll just show it here in the video and then I'll go back and fix it. But anyway, once again, the Blogspot one, also very much worth checking out. It's asaobinoue.blogspot.com/2021/06/what is labor-based grading system and .html. And that title, What is Labor-Based Grading System and, has dashes between each word. So there we have it. Excuse me. But thank you so much. It's always great to kind of think through this with you. Once again, my socials, I've got email, Facebook, Bluesky, YouTube, and Mastodon. I can be found in all of those places. And please hit like and subscribe. And I wish you the best. I hope your preparations for the semester are off to a good start. I'm going to continue to try to push for the next few weeks as I just kind of share what has helped me be successful, with AI. Where, and I guess when I say successful, I mean I feel like the students, kind of was able to, they had a good chance to learn, and even using AI, there are some good opportunities in there because AI, of course, is not going away and could be a useful writing tool. And I think for any writer, it is about exploring it a little bit. And in my case, what I'm doing is I'm just kind of slowing down and giving the students an additional opportunity to process information so that they can learn about writing as well in the class, because that's what it's really about. It's learning about writing. So thank you so much, and I will see you again next time. Have a great day.